Hello, Danhausen here. Very nice. Very evil. Danhausen is a blimp and many bags of money, so he can go anywhere and do anything whenever Danhausen wants. But you fool, you need to purchase your tickets for the final live audio war right away. That's right. Otherwise, you'll be cursed. It's bad. 20 very loud, very talented noise artists, including Danhausen's friend housing Psywarfare, will descend upon Cleveland October 12th. Do not miss this, for it will be very harsh, very noisy. Use your internet machine, I think it's called a computer of some sort, for flawfest.com for more info, housing, or be cursed. I already told you that's bad. So, do it, or be cursed. Bye.
A collection of new White Centipede Noise merch is available now to pre-order. A brand new t-shirt designed by Matthias Gustafsson of Altar of Flies, an embroidered cap and crossbody bag, as well as reprints of the black t-shirts and hoodies with the classic White Centipede Noise logo, just in time for fall. Reserve yours by pre-ordering today at whitecentipedenoise.com. The new Ochu LP Dry Routine is available from the web store, as well as 4 recent CDs from the Rita, Jim Haynes, Trerix Roset, and Primitive Isolation Tactics. The Patreon-exclusive 3-CD podcast compilation is also still available for the time being for only €9. You can find the link to purchase at patreon.com/whitecentipedenoise. This is White Centipede Noise Podcast. I'm Oscar Brummel, and today my guest is Dwid Hellion of pioneering hardcore band Integrity, as well as the sonically assaultive noise project Psywarfare. We conducted this interview at his home studio in Ghent, Belgium. Psywarfare is playing at Flaw Festival in Cleveland, Ohio on October 12th, alongside a huge lineup of top-tier noise artists, such as Aaron Dilloway, The Rita, Kakerlak, and many more. There's also a bonus WCN TV episode touring Dwid's studio, along with today's podcast episode, as well as an exclusive Psywarfare track that you can find on Patreon. All right, Dwid.
Hi.
Welcome to White Centipede Noise Podcast. We're up here in your studio in Ghent. And stoked to talk about Integrity as well as, the noise-focused side of things, Psywarfare.
Thanks, Oscar. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to Belgium.
Yeah. So you're an American living in Belgium. We have something in common in that sense already. I'm a big noise head, as you know. I didn't grow up exposed to punk or hardcore really. So my knowledge of that stuff comes from getting into noise, even black metal and stuff like that. I had no idea. I don't think I ever even heard of black metal, the term, before I got into noise.
Oh.
And then it was that was the jumping point. So Integrity is a really important band to a lot of people and to, I think, the history of hardcore. And but when we talk about it, you'll have to maybe forgive me that if I don't know about people, affiliated with that time.
No, it's okay. Most people get everything about it wrong anyway. So
But
don't feel bad.
But you should share anything that's relevant, because I know a lot of people watching are very, very, big followers and fans of your entire legacy. And, Roman Leva is one person that, I know has a strong connection to Integrity.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He's a great guy. He's, from Slit Throats, the noise side of things, but he's from Cleveland. You're from Cleveland.
Yeah.
I know he really was inspired and a big fan of your work as Integrity and Psywarfare. And you are also going to be playing in Cleveland at his festival.
Yeah.
Very soon in October, right?
October, Flaw Fest.
You're headlining with some amazing acts as Psywarfare. Tell me about the beginning of Psywarfare, how it coincided with your hardcore band, because, early Integrity stuff had a lot of noisy interludes, intros, things like that, which I think seems like that was pretty fresh at the time.
Yeah.
Right?
At the time, it wasn't considered fresh. It was considered heretical, blasphemous. People were pissed.
Yeah.
They didn't like that.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
But back in the 80s, things were divided. Music was very divided. And if you were a person that liked a lot of different kinds of music, you were seen as maybe like someone they couldn't trust, maybe someone who was, I don't know. There was a deep hatred for people who liked more than one genre of music.
Crazy.
It was a weird time.
Did that end at some point while you were still?
I don't know if I think it got lessened over the years, but I still have people who are vocally critical that I like more than one kind of music.
Yeah.
And as you said, hardcore, when we like hardcore in the 80s meant punk and metal, and somewhere in between the gray area was hardcore. And so you had like Black Flag was hardcore, but you also had other bands that were not at all like Black Flag that were also considered hardcore. So, and then you're also in the underground scene, so you're wanting to just say fuck labels, fuck genres, I mean. And people wanted, even though they were underground, they somehow were still like junior conformists that wanted to align themselves with some kind of a label for themselves to be in the subgenre, and they thought that they were dangerous, but at the same time conforming. And if you liked different things, then they were intimidated by that, I guess. And so we had a lot of backlash because of that. And so like even when the first records came out, like hardcore music was kind of known for having zines and things like that back before the internet. So they would make like zines that would say, don't listen to this band because they have solos, because the lyrics are about different things that we don't like them to be about, or that we're not familiar with that type of content. So therefore we don't like it and things like that. So there was a lot of that.
They would literally like call you out in zines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
I mean, the weirdest thing, like for me, for the first 15, 20 years of my band, everyone in hardcore said, this band is not hardcore. This band, it's metal, it's this. And the metal people, this is not metal, this is hardcore, whatever. So the past 10, 15 years, people in journalists or whatever will say, oh, hardcore, and you guys were this and hardcore. And so to me, it's kind of crazy because for like decades, people in hardcore despised what we did and hated it with a passion. So it's a weird thing. Well, we were on a label that was called Victory Records, and it was predominantly known for hardcore, but we hated the label. We always wanted to get off, but nobody else would put out our records, and so we were kind of stuck.
I was reading something about Victory. I don't know like I don't have the base knowledge of the history, but like that there were some also controversy around the label or the guy who ran it.
He was not an honest person that didn't want to pay anybody.
Okay.
That might have been what.
Yeah, exactly. Is that something you had experienced?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Before the advent of MP3s, somehow nobody bought our records at all. We never recouped, and yet we toured all over the world and had packed houses. That's weird because like now you could say, oh, it's on because of Spotify or MP3 sharing. But back then, I mean, there wasn't that many people doing cassette dubs for one another,
And he was like,
lyrics,
oh, sorry guys, it's just it's not
that's
not moving.
So that was a big thing with it. As far as like electronic stuff and noise and experimental sounds, I grew up actually in Indiana, not in Cleveland. I moved to Cleveland when I was like 16 years old with my parents, with my father. But when I grew up in Indiana, I lived like on a farm in the middle of nowhere with nothing going on at all, nothing around me. And this was in the 70s. So you didn't have, even VHS players weren't invented at the time. All I had was a cassette deck. It was like the kind that like you find at like old libraries or whatever, like this little box thing. And so somebody from my family gave me one of those to play with, and then I treated it like a toy. I didn't know what it was for or what it was, and I just would like be bored out of my mind and fuck around with it. And at some point I noticed that there was screws in the corners of it. And then I thought, I wonder how this fucking thing works. So I took it apart and I would like fuck around with it and rub it with my hands and make it sound fucked up and be like, oh, that sounds cool. And then at some point I made like loop tapes by accident, not because I thought I was making music. I just thought, oh, I wonder if that would work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did it badly. So like where I splice the tape together, we have a big dead space, you know, but you know, and I used to watch on Friday nights around midnight, once a week, they would have a horror movie on. And the horror host for the town that I lived in was called, or the area that I lived in was called Sammy Terry. It was like a play on cemetery.
Uh-huh.
And in the 70s, you had these guys that are horror hosts, and they would host films, and it'd be like a guy dressed up as a vampire or a ghoul or something. And he would say some kind of funny stuff and try to scare the kids, and then play Dracula or Frankenstein or whatever, Hammer movies and stuff. So I really loved that. And that was the thing I would look forward to every week. But I couldn't contain it because there was no VHS invented yet. There was definitely no internet or anything like that to go back and watch it. So I was like, I bet I could like record it with my cassette player. And so I would set the cassette player near the big TV. And it was like a big fucking thing, like the size of like a refrigerator or something, you know? And I would record that. And then throughout the week, I'd play it back and listen to it and then reimagine what I thought I had seen because I had no way of retaining that. And then I would like draw what I thought I saw. And then it would like I would do it wrong, which ended up being great for me because then I was like exercising my imagination. So it was like a weird thing like that where I was accidentally training my imagination because of my limited resources of tech and abilities to record and contain something that I wanted desperately. Because if I had the opportunity at the time, I would just only watch horror movies. But you couldn't buy fucking tapes of it because you didn't have the player to watch it yet. So none of that stuff existed. So I just used the cassette deck. And I lived with my grandparents. And they had these old, they had an old record player that was like in like this big cabinet thing. And it could also record records too. But what I liked about it
Like
was
on tape?
No, onto blank records, like acetones. You would record like you wouldn't record music. Well, I guess you could, but you would record like happy birthday or like, hey, it's somebody's, you could read a poem, stuff like that. It was real basic stuff. But it also had, it would do like 16, 33, 45, and 78 RPM. And they had these bigger 78 records, which is like bigger than the normal ones. And I one day was bored and mischievous. So I took Elmer's glue, you know what that is? Elmer's glue, and I covered one of these old gospel or country western records or whatever it was, or maybe both. And I just covered it with glue, and I thought, okay, in the couple hours it'll dry. It didn't dry. Maybe tomorrow it'll dry. Still didn't fucking dry. It took like 4 or 5 days. And finally it did dry out. And then I peeled it off because I had like silly putty and I could like understood the idea of making, you know, like kind of molded copies. I had Play-Doh and things. So I was using that idea in my head and I would peel it off and I would have an inversion of those records. Then I would put that on the turntable and play that and that would sound like super crazy. And so like the whole thing was just boredom and I was trying to find a way to not be bored. And that was how I got into it, into making sounds like that. But I didn't have any idea that anybody would ever want to hear this stuff other than me, because I was like, oh, this is interesting, you know.
Did it have, I mean, with the horror film visuals to go along with it, do you remember it having like a specific atmosphere or color? Did it feel dark or horror, or was it just kind of like sound experiments?
Well, I would try to make stuff that would be a soundtrack to what I was envisioning from watching the old black and white horror movies. Like that was my thing. You know? I'm not really into the, you know, the porno Xeroxy thing. That's not for me as much. I'm more into old horror movies. That was what resonated with me. So, I guess subconsciously I was trying to create like soundtrack to that. And back then they would just really use like old classical pieces played, and it wasn't really as scary as it could have been, you know.
Right.
Maybe modern stuff gets into more scary things.
I mean, some of your early Psywarfare stuff, some of the pieces really do sound like turntable experiments.
loopings.
Yeah. The one I was listening to recently, it's a Mexican city.
Oh, from Psychotepic with Love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The last track on that's like a really long loop piece, and it's like kind of like carnival-esque, like nauseating music, and that sounds. I mean, not to you tell that story, it sounds like maybe that could have a.
Yeah, I think that there was always a soundtrack element to the stuff that I was doing, even though it wasn't conscious. Or maybe my idea was that I'm making a soundtrack to something in my head that I'm not actually visually sharing with people. I don't know. I didn't really have it formed in my head, like why I was doing it. I was just doing it. But like, so I got into, my parents moved from Indiana. They got divorced, and my father moved from Indiana to Louisville, Kentucky. And that would be 83, 84. And I got into, because of school, I met some kids who were into punk. And they had some bands and things like that. So I would like go to shows with them and see punk. And even like Sam Hain played like a street behind my house and stuff, with the local kids band, which was called Maurice. So I found out about this punk stuff, and I got into that, and I was like, this is cool. But it still wasn't the stuff I was experimenting with as a little kid. And because I was doing that like, I don't know, like 6, 7, 8 years old with these little tape machines. But again, it wasn't that I thought anybody would fucking give a fuck about that. I mean, I just did it because it was something to do, like drawing on paper that I would just throw it away. No one ever saw it again, and it was like that. I never was like, hey, check this out. Because also in my head, I thought, oh, every kid does it, and it's just a thing you do, you know, like drawing, and then you throw away your drawings. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. And because of punk, I started mail order punk records because you couldn't always get them. And there was a label from Arizona that I would buy records from called Placebo Records. And Placebo Records was known mostly for a skate punk band called JFA and a goth punk band called Mighty Sphincter, who I really liked. And so I would, whenever I had a little bit of money that I could order, and the records were cheap back then, like, I don't know, $4 or something, I don't know. So like I would order records, and then eventually they'd come to your house like a really long time later. And one time, and when you'd order them, they come with like a Xerox paper that would say like, oh, coming soon is this one, this one, and this one. And at some point there was a record called Dry Lungs. And it was a compilation. And I was like, oh, maybe that's cool. You know, I think the cover looked cool. I don't know why I ordered it. So I ordered that. And that was a record that had Merzbow and Controlled Bleeding. And then I was like, wow, this is kind of like that stuff I made. How are they making records like that? That doesn't make sense, you know? And around that same time, I had moved to Cleveland a little bit later, and I was put in like a boarding school for bad kids. And my friend, his name's Bill Gill. He actually works for Taylor Guitars now. And Bill was like my neighbor in the dorm. And he and I decided we would start a band, but because we didn't know how to play musical instruments, we would just use like this idea of what I did as a kid, and we called it Eerie Wax. And because it had sort of like a double entendre of like earwax, but also eerie, like it's scary, and wax, like records.
Yeah,
and
cool.
So it was kind of, you know, little 15-year-old kid silliness. And what we used was like his stereo, and we would like plug in, if you take a headphone, like normal headphones like this, and you plug these into the mic jack, then the speaker becomes a mic. So that was another thing I would do as a kid, is experiment with that. So we would like yell through that, and like I think that it maybe had like some kind of an echo built into it, or some effects were in it, and we would fuck with that. And also if you get close to the speaker, it would feed back, and you'd have that going. And we had loop tapes going, and then the school was super pissed. We were like, he had
was at the school?
It was at the boarding school.
Oh, okay.
And his room was in the corner, like where it overlooked an area where the kids would congregate. and we just opened up the windows and like would just blast it out, and like people would be like, "What the fuck is this?" And so it was a lot of fun, and we antagonized people with that, and so that was probably like the first time that was the first time I ever performed any kind of music ever, and
Do you have any of those eerie wax recordings?
no, we didn't record it because we had to use the stereo to project what we had.
Sure.
So like the loop tape would be playing,
Yeah.
and we would be yelling. I think we would like be able to yell over it, or maybe it had a double tape deck, and one we could hit record, and then we could run the voice through that, while the other thing would loop nonsense, and then we would do feeding back and other dumb stuff. No, I don't have any recording like that. It would be funny to have. I don't have anything like that, and
It's still pretty advanced. I mean, it's experimentation. I mean, it's not that advanced, but still pretty advanced, like signal flow kind of thought and theory for.
we had a lot of time on our hands.
Yeah.
There wasn't any option to like look at a phone or
Yeah.
anything like. We didn't have that, so all we could do is be like
Yeah.
thirsty for whatever you could do. You know, like, oh, maybe we can do this, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't work. And then shortly after that, I discovered college radio in Cleveland. And there was a couple stations. One is WUJC, which is John Carroll University. There was a Cleveland State University, and there was a Case Western University. They all three had college radio, and college radio would play weird records. So you could hear like Throbbing Gristle or White House or punk records or whatever you wanted to hear. But also they would have shows where like, you know, it was student run. So sometimes there would be channels, which were my favorites, where kids would just like, students would just like have a show, and they would run the signal from the audience calling in into a board and run effects on that. So you could call up and be like saying, if you said profanity,
Yeah.
they would turn you off
Right.
because there was some kind of law
FCC
about
or
it.
something like
Yeah,
that.
FCC.
Yeah.
But you could do like crazy voices and things and make sounds with your mouth and different things like, or make whatever you wanted, and it would go through the radio, and like then those we would like record that too,
Yeah.
and like be like, this is cool. But we didn't release it, and I don't know what happened to those tapes. This is 40 years ago, you know. So.
When you were very young and first experimenting with that stuff, I know you said it was like kind of out of boredom and stuff like that and just like messing around, but did you also feel like you were like destroying something or perverting something or like subverting
Yeah.
something? Was that
Definitely that.
a part
yeah.
of the appeal of it?
I thought I was doing something wrong,
Yeah.
and I liked that.
Yeah.
So similar to that guitar that I told you about, like where the teacher was saying like, this is acid rock, this
Yeah.
is the devil's music. I mean, that like excited me to know that they were like afraid of that.
Yeah.
I don't know why it excited me, but it
Sure.
did. As a young kid, I remember feeling like somehow that I had like a bit of an upper hand over them, and
Yeah.
that they were intimidated by that.
Yeah.
THFX Noise Devices is the home of the Melancholia, Vox Vortex, Harsh Anti, and the Rita's Cracked Point Shoe. Unique pieces and custom builds made of the best metal parts, no cheap plastics, no mass production. Handcrafted since 2021 in Hamburg, Germany. For more information and the mailing list, head over to thfxnoisedevices.com.
So at some point, I'm sure a lot of things happen between, but like at some point you formed Integrity.
Yeah. Well, Integrity wasn't my first band,
Yeah.
but I had a band called Die Hard before that, and that was because I met this guy named Aaron Melnick, and Aaron was like me. He liked a lot of different music, and like I said earlier, like if you liked different music, you were considered like something was wrong with you.
Mm.
And one of our friends actually said, "Hey, this guy, you would like this guy because he's a weirdo like you. He likes other music." Like it was like
Yeah.
terrible to
Yeah.
do that, like to these people, not to me. I
Yeah.
liked it. I didn't give a fuck,
Yeah.
you know. But so we hit it off well because we had a lot of similar tastes in music, and then eventually we started doing bands together that were more metal based and punk based as bands.
Okay.
But then when we started to record, because I had fucked around with stuff as a kid, when I went into a real studio, I realized like some of the things were not exactly familiar with me, but to a degree. Like I was like, oh, I kind of understand this because I did that with tape machines or I did that with these other toys or whatever. And so I was able to navigate the studio a little bit better than the other guys who hadn't been in there before. Not that I was Rick Rubin or anything, but I like had like, I don't know, something in me. Like I knew, for example, we would record to reel. That's how you'd record the masters on these big tapes that would like look like movie film tapes. And then I asked the guy at the studio, I said, well, what happens if we reverse it? Can we record and then flip it backwards? And he was like, didn't want to do it, but he realized that what I said made sense, that it could be done. And so then we tried it and it worked. And so we did things where it was like running backwards. And then once we did it, we would record it. We would make the tape originally backwards. We would record it and we'd flip it back and then it would be recorded backwards, but we would play it forward over top of it, like stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, now you do it with computers and it's like immediately done. Back then you had to physically change stuff to do that and get people mad, because they didn't want to ruin their equipment.
Right.
Because they didn't even really want to record us. The only reason they recorded us was because we had a record deal. And most people that went to the studio they were just recording covers that they would make cassette tapes and sell at their local shows. Them doing covers of pop songs, Bon Jovi or something, and then they would sell that to people. And we were the only ones recording.
Those weren't punk bands though. They were like rock.
No, they were like glam bands.
Yeah, okay.
Like cock rock bands. That was popular.
Okay.
For this studio.
Yeah.
The other studios in town were more R&B based or hip hop based, but mostly R&B. And in fact, Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails was an intern at the studio that was 2 floors down from my loft apartment at a place called Right Track Studio. And he recorded Pretty Hate Machine there on his off hours.
Cool.
He didn't need to work there. He just worked there because you couldn't go to school to learn how to run boards and things like that. So
this was in Cleveland?
Yeah, in Cleveland.
Yeah, okay.
This was a couple years when I was older and lived on my own.
Yeah.
But we didn't record there because they wouldn't let us record there. So we had to go out to this other place that would do like cock rock stuff. And they would only do R&B and hip hop stuff. So like he would record like Levert and like Heavy D and the Boys and stuff. So that must have been a pretty weird experience. Trent Reznor running the board for like Heavy D and the Boys.
That's far out.
And like the Levert brothers had like some kind of side. One of their siblings had a side thing where they were like kind of like the Fat Boys, where they were like fat dudes who would like rap about pizza or something. I can't remember what it was called. We'd always see them in like the elevator, and it was ridiculous.
So Die Hard with Melnick, one of the Melnick.
Aaron Melnick, yeah.
Aaron Melnick, okay.
So Lenny Melnick is his brother, and he played bass in Integrity for a while. But he really only joined the band because he's like a crazy savant type person who can like just fucking do anything. And he's a lot young. He was a lot at the time. It seemed a lot younger than us. He was just a few years younger than us. But so like our bass player quit in Integrity, and we needed a bass player. So Aaron was like, "Hey, why don't you fucking do it?" And he was in middle school, so we were like going and touring in Europe and stuff. And he was like a kid in middle school who like his brother made him be in the band.
Did he like get? I mean, I'm sure you guys are
fantastic at bass.
But did he like get around with you guys?
Crazy.
Did he go on tour and stuff like that with you guys?
Yeah, he went on tour with us. Yeah.
I bet you guys are pretty wild at that time.
Oh yeah, we were raising hell, causing a lot of trouble.
So that's what I mean. When your name gets brought up, people often say, Dwid is intense, Dwid is hardcore, like whatever. Dwid's, like Dwid's a legend, Dwid's a beast, blah, blah, blah. What are they referring to? When you say raising hell, what are we talking about?
Oh, so many things. I mean, for example, like Aaron and I and his brother Lenny, we would have contests to see who could eat the most LSD. And we would buy LSD from Rich Patrick, who was the guitar player from Nine Inch Nails, before they were getting popular and stuff. And we would just have contests to see who could eat the most. Then we would like break into like this old police building and try to like find our way around there and like navigate around psychotic homeless people who were trying to kill us and whatever else. And we would just get into fights. We would destroy things. We would flip cars. We would just we were fucking complete assholes, you know. But we also were like making crazy music, and we were like, that was just what we wanted to do. Was like
This is while Integrity
destroy
was
everything.
having their success or being active, right?
Yeah, I was with Integrity.
Yeah.
I don't know about success, but we were traveling, touring,
Yeah.
causing trouble,
Yeah.
getting into trouble.
Did any like serious jail time?
No, nothing serious with jail. We went to jail little bits. I went to jail a bunch of little stints, short ones. Even in England, I went to jail
Wow.
because we didn't have the right paperwork to go there, the first tour that we did. And then I like said something rude to them and they were pissed and then they put me in jail. So like me and another guy from the band. And so like me and that guy, Chuck Euler, we were in jail. And so we were singing London Dungeon. Well, but it was in Dover, but we didn't care about the semantics of it. So we would sing it in our jail cell. Then they let us out the next day, and we actually got deported to Belgium.
Okay.
Oddly enough, and on the boat that was coming over, the ferry from Dover, we were sleeping on our fucking luggage, and then this band walked by and they talked to us a little bit. And that was Napalm Death. So they were going on a real tour. We were just fucking shitbags. Like managed somehow to get a tour together, sort of, that wasn't organized.
Divine Severance is an Australian label that releases a variety of different genres, including but not limited to harsh noise, power electronics, black metal, death metal, and more. Tapes soon to be released in the coming months: Moore's Fornax, The Death Furnace Demo, Rope Society, The Golden Rim, Astra Telepathica, The Emperor Protects, Puddle, Pulling Back the Layers of Unbridled Joy. Visit divineseverancerecords.bandcamp.com.
I feel like I want to know a little more like about the antics and like the destruction, but I don't want to take too much focus away from the music and stuff like that. But like,
well, that was part of it, though. I mean, it was part of it to be like the chaos was part of to be chaotic was to make the music.
Right.
It's like the blues. Like if you're like fucking happy and you're making the blues, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
So it was like that. I mean, for this kind of music, it was music for destruction, and that was what we were trying to do. Self-destruct too, probably. And also we were kids and we were like, going through teenage into a young adult period, and we were totally into chaos. And the music was also that we liked was chaotic, and we wanted to emulate that kind of music, and we just thought that was what we were supposed to do. It's what we felt inside, so we did it. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of things I shouldn't have done.
Sure.
And
I mean, it seems like you have you've made it out in the sense that you have a pretty beautiful life here, beautiful family and things, you seem to be pretty happy and stable. But I mean, do you have people that didn't make it out, or like people that you lost to that kind of time or era or mentality?
I have a lot of friends that died. Yeah. So different ways, different means, So, yeah, a lot of people didn't make it out. A lot of people also like switched and went a different direction, went into a different type of lifestyle or didn't like that kind of music anymore, grew out of it or whatever it would be, gave up on that kind of thing. Or grew up, I guess would be the right way.
Sure.
I never grew up. So.
What about like rivalries with other bands? Was that a part of it? Like,
yeah, there would always be some bands that were pissed at us. Either pissed at us because they wanted some opportunity that maybe they perceived that we had that they deserved, or they just didn't like what kind of music we were making. Again, as I said earlier, the kind of music that we made was not orthodox. Now, if you listen to it 36 years later, it might sound calm and boring compared to whatever is happening. I don't know. But at the time, it was considered like crazy to do that kind of music. And also having, weirdly enough, having guitar solos, having the lyrical content, having that type of imagery. At that time, people weren't doing that. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, I'm a pioneer, oh,
Right.
look at me. I'm saying it like, that's just what we wanted to do.
Mhm.
And our thought pattern was, our thought process was, okay, we like these bands, but what would we like to listen to using these as influences? Like, okay, this is cool, like what this band is doing here with guitars, and this band is doing this thing here, cool with bass, and this with vocals, but there's something that's missing for us or for me. I want to put like what I like into that kind of idea and then put my own spin on it. And that's what I thought, and I think Aaron thought music was supposed to be like, that kind of creativity. But we were told very early on that that was wrong and that you can't do that. You have to fucking follow the rules. And we were like, fuck you. And that probably added to the animosity and the adversity that we projected with the music and with ourselves. Because if you're told not to, you're not allowed to do something in underground music, I mean, that just doesn't fucking process in my head and just makes me fucking violent. So it was like that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, well, that's a whole other topic I don't really want to touch on or get too deep into, but like I feel like that's been a kind of thing in punk for a long time, and I think that's also kind of thing that is sort of happening in power electronics or noise in some sense. Is like there are certain people who are like, you know, power electronics and noise from its onset is very overly extreme and takes an even more extreme position than anything else. But I think there's a kind of a pushback in some ways about certain content or certain themes and things like that going on now, which is a big topic for discussion. And like I said, it's not the time for that, but interesting that you experienced that also at that.
Well, like you said with power electronics, I mean, so there was like punk, which is sloppy, played Chuck Berry songs with cuss words and fuck the Queen, fuck the government, but it's still Chuck Berry,
Right.
just badly played.
Right.
And so like people like White House were like, yeah, I mean, like, this isn't really dangerous. This is like my dad's music, but played sloppy.
Yeah.
And maybe with a cuss word in there too. So then they took something that was, I mean, I can't speak for them, but the way I always thought of it was that they were like, we're going to take the most futuristic type instruments, which would be synthesizers and stuff, and then try to like use that in a capacity that would be more punk than punk, which pissed off the punk people, which was good in my opinion, and made something of their own. It's something new and fresh.
Integrity's lyrics, and themes and artwork and things like that, like have this really dark, apocalyptic, maybe nihilistic subject matter and an atmosphere, which I sense. I talked to Roman beforehand. He was like, like really stressed that Integrity really changed the landscape, and that it dealt with different types of topics, had a different type of dark energy than hardcore before then. And what was it that attracted you to these topics and made you say, like, let's bring them into this music?
I didn't do it that way. What I did was my parents are Pentecostal, so they believe in like extreme faith. And I was told from an early age, whenever I was interested in unorthodox things like vampire movies or weird music or any of that stuff, that it was the devil's doing and that I was going to burn in hell. And so that kind of resonated with me. And again, like I said before, like gave me this kind of good feeling. And throughout my life, I would like, I guess at that time I was like really rebelling against the religious upbringing that I had, like a strong religious upbringing. But I also found it to be interesting. And simultaneously, growing up in the 70s and 80s, I would have my breakfast cereal and there would be a milk carton on the table with a kid's face that looked like me, who was missing, who was abducted, who was part of the satanic panic where satanic cults are abducting kids and all of this. So I would think I'm an overthinker to my detriment probably, and also to my benefit sometimes. But I would think like, is this true? You know, and like also Charles Manson was like on TV all the time as the boogeyman, and they would like always parade him out and be like, this is, you know, what he's gonna come and get you if you fucking don't behave. So all these elements like led me to like question, is there really this satanic thing that's going on? Is there really this underbelly of the world of humanity that's existing outside of my family life, outside of the people that I know? Because I'm a little kid, you know, and there's no ability to access this stuff yet. So that stuck in my head and kept like a loop tape going over and over and over again in my head. Like, is this real? Why are people fucking saying that it's real? It has to be real. There's kids missing and all this
Were you
stuff.
doubting it?
I just didn't know. But I knew that there were kids missing, and I just thought, I mean, probably because of my love of horror movies and things like that, I probably thought that I wanted to find the sinister core of humanity that's being hidden from me. Like, so, like one of my strengths and weaknesses as a human being, as myself, is that I'm a problem solver, but not necessarily always for positive. But I go over things until I find a solution to it. That's like my skill set. I'm not a good musician. I'm not a good lyricist. I'm not a good singer. I'm not a good anything. But I'm able to like process obstacles in my head until I can find the way to break it and make it into what I need it to make. If that's I'm being pretty vague about it, but that's kind of how it works in my head. That's my thought process.
Sure.
And that's my strength. And so that was one thing that got stuck in my head, and I just kept going over and over and over again in my head. And then so like when you're in the 70s and 80s and you're interested in this underground music, you didn't have any means of contacting people. There was no internet or any of that stuff. But what you could do is some of the more dangerous elements to the music would usually be sold in stores that also sold like sex stuff, like S&M stores, bondage stores, stuff like that. So you could go into those stores and buy books also on punk and electronic, you know, extreme electronic music, or zines on that, and records and sometimes merch and things. But also they'd have the sex component in there. And you'd get these zines that would also just be about serial killers and different things like that, and cults. And in the back, there would be like what they called classified ads. And people could pay like $1 or I don't know. And you could have a little classified ad, and you'd either have a P.O. box, or you'd have like a phone number, and you could make a pen pal, we called it. And you could correspond with people, and they would say like what they were interested in. Sometimes it would be sex stuff. Sometimes it would be like occult stuff. Sometimes it'd be like trading tapes of whatever.
Yeah.
Like audio tapes of Charles Manson or something like that. So I would become pen pals with people through that. And I met a lot of people who ended up being a musician, people in underground music, like Peter Sotos and Boyd Rice and other people like that. And also there were people that I would write to who I don't really remember their names, but they were more like predator people or people who were really probably killing people.
Right.
Or at least really wanting to, and perhaps they did, and you know, I don't know. But my goal in a lot of that, besides learning new things and meeting people who were extreme people or people who were, you know, pushing the limits, pushing the envelope, was that I wanted to find out if there was this like end of the world satanic cult that was trying to destroy everything. Because some part of me really wants that to exist, and I wanted to maybe like help push it over the edge, I guess. I don't know. And so that led me down a lot of strange paths with people and with knowledge. And that informed a lot of the lyrical content as well, because that was what I was interested in and still am interested in. But now that I'm older and now that I've met enough people, I can piece some things together, and I know like a little bit more of the landscape of how some of this stuff came to be, and where the sources came from, and some things like that. And of course, some things that a lot of these guys weren't caught, and
Did you make any conclusions about that along the way? I mean, you kind of mentioned just now that you have now at this point made some conclusions about all of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
I mean,
earlier on, did you ever? I mean, what were your conclusions about that as
so on my
you were in contact and discovering this as you kind of jump off the porch, so to speak?
Yeah, on my very first album, which was called Those Who Fear Tomorrow, at the beginning of the record starts off with a low rumbling bass sound, similar to like White House, I guess, where it's
Yeah.
infrasonic bass. But instead of having a synth, I just took uh, Aaron's brother's bass and just beat on the back of it until it reverberated the right way. And then I messed with the EQs a little bit on the board, and then I recorded that. And then I had made a cassette where I had like paused and placed everything that had Henry Lee Lucas talking about his involvement with this organized cult that was trying to show the rotting side of America as an apple. Like on the inside, the core is rotten. On the outside, it's a bright, shiny red, beautiful apple. On the inside, it's rotten. And so that was maybe my first foray into that type of, mixing the noise stuff, but also mixing the end of the world thing and my discoveries with interacting with these people. And so he called it the hand of death, but there was a thing called 4P, which is a variant of the process church, which is controversial for the internet because the internet likes to try to portray the process church as being solely your grandma's Christian group, and then none of the bad stuff ever happened, including they accidentally interviewed Charles Manson not once but twice for their magazine, but they had nothing to do with him and never met him before either. There's all this like really weird apologist aspect to the process church, but I can say this as a means of understanding that the process church has four sides to it. I don't want to bore everybody with this shit, but process church has four sides to it, and if you weren't part of the more destructive side of it, then you probably wouldn't know what they were doing in that regard. So when these guys say with full passion and truth that wasn't something that they experienced in their experience with the process church, I believe that that's true, that they didn't, but they can't blanketly say that it never occurred because they weren't in that part.
Right.
It's like, you're at a movie theater and you're saying, oh, this didn't happen in the movie, but the guy who was behind the cameras, who was running the camera, he had a different experience than the guy who's sitting in the seats or the guy who's selling the popcorn.
Right.
So, they don't see it that way, and they think that their perspective is the only perspective, and there's a lot of disagreement in that regard with that stuff. But that was something that they set out to destroy human life, and they went around and encouraged people to be destructive and to do diabolical things in the name of Satan, and also in the name of showing that America isn't the heroic creature that it portrays itself to be.
Yeah.
So,
have you ever had any personal connection to the process church?
Personal connection? What do you mean?
Involvement or knowing people in
it had gone. It had ceased before the time.
Right.
I know people who were in it. Yeah. But it had stopped.
Disbanded
By the time I was a kid, even. There's a group. There's an organization in America called Best Friends, which is an animal shelter, and that's what the process is now. It still exists, and I don't think that they're doing all the diabolical stuff that I just spoke.
Okay.
So the people who are going to go there with their application to join, I don't think that's going to be what they're expecting.
Okay. Okay, so you were introducing these noise and also like apocalyptic, transgressive elements to early Integrity Records.
Yeah, I mean, but this was just stuff I liked. It wasn't like I was like, I need to make a business plan here
Right.
and I'm going to go in a different direction than these other guys are all going in that direction.
Sure.
It was really just like, I like this. And therefore, if I'm going to be true to what I'm going to create, it should be something that I like,
Mhm.
something personal, because I have to say it. If I'm going to talk about like the perspective of Oscar's life, then it's not going to be valid because I'm not you.
Right.
You have your own taste, you have your own interests, and you have your own experiences that you can draw from. And if I'm going to try to cosplay you, it's going to come across fake and it won't be rewarding for me to do that. So for me, I just thought I'm supposed to make stuff that I like.
It was just you. It was, I mean, the music was just you.
Well, Aaron also.
Well,
with
okay,
the
but I
music.
mean the output, the creative output, the artistic output. What you're saying is it was just a reflection of
of my interests.
Yeah.
So when but I was told by a lot of people that that's not the way you're supposed to do it. Not that I care, and not that I got the manual. I guess they forgot to send it to me,
Yeah.
But I just did whatever I
punk
fucking
manual.
wanted to. Yeah. And they're like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to sound like everybody else. I'm like, why? Why would you want to fucking do that? You
Yeah.
know? Even making records, like people say, like, every record should sound the same. I'm not fucking Burger King or
Yeah.
McDonald's like giving you the same Whopper or
Yeah.
Big Mac every fucking time. You
Yeah.
know, you don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
So, and especially with Psywarfare, I mean, the name itself should be like buyer beware.
Yeah.
I'm here to fuck with you.
Yeah.
I'm not here to fucking supply you with what you're hoping to get. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not fucking Santa Claus.
Yeah.
I'm a troublemaker who's, an aspiring serial killer terrorist who luckily found music instead. And I think that there's a big component to this kind of music where a lot of these people, if they didn't find music, they probably would be in jail for other things.
Yeah.
A lot of people who I've met over the years, I've often said that they're lucky that they found music or their artistic output, because they probably would have ended up doing something very illegal.
I'm not saying you're not right about that, but I do feel like musicians have do you feel like you have like a fair amount of empathy for people?
I have empathy and apathy of equal amounts sometimes. And sometimes it's too much to be able to process properly. And that gives me confusing thoughts.
And I think that's what probably separates you a lot of musicians, I think, from being actual sociopathic killers or whatever, because I think there's a steep sensitivity and feeling for other people at the same time mixed with the rage. I don't know. I can't speak for you,
but you have a valve through music or through whatever you're doing, whatever creative means you have a release valve that's letting some of the pressure out when you do that, whatever pressure that would be. And so you're able to, I think, contain any kind of bad impulses from doing that. I'm really painting a bad picture psychologically of myself in your interview.
No. Well, you weren't until you called yourself an aspiring terrorist or serial killer.
Well, I think that there's a lot of that. I mean, a lot of people who I've met, I'm not going to name them in this because they might not like it, but there's a lot of people who I've met who are in that kind of music, who I've thought while talking to them, like, I bet that if this music stuff wasn't available to them, they might have gone like this way or that way. Maybe just because of the interest in those types of content, you know, because that was also like a really, I don't know if it is now, but in the 80s and 90s, that kind of thing of cults and serial killers, that was really like a hot topic for people. Like that was a really passionate thing to be interested in and just like try to figure it out. Whether they were trying to figure it out by how can someone be that way, or maybe they had inclinations that they were going to go that way, or I don't know. Also, maybe I'm one of those too. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm having inclinations to actually kill people, but
Yeah.
There were times where I thought about it, and
Sure.
and luckily I had music instead.
I wonder about that because I mean, I think like a lot. Usually, serial killers, like it turns out, they are like deep collectors and researchers of the topic.
Yeah.
But for the people who have like a kind of an art interest in it, there seems to be a different element there. They like sharing it with people, and they like networking, and I don't know. It just seems like there is that same like deep fascination, but there's some other element that's either there or missing. I don't know. But there are some
Hopefully.
but there are parallels where you see like, okay, someone is just deeply obsessed with like harming, things that not
Yeah.
doing it themselves, but like media or art or documentation about harming people or whatever. And but I usually think that there's something mixed in there that just sort of keeps it
Yeah, I mean,
on a level.
you could be right as well. I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. I'm not even sure about what I am or who I am about some of this stuff. And I know that, I never had the courage to take it too far either,
Right.
so, but, yeah, I think that to some people in music, there's a leaning towards that kind of possibility for
Yeah.
their career could have went that direction
Yeah.
instead of this
Sure.
direction.
Sure.
That's a weird conversation.
It's good. So Psywarfare as a noise, as an individual project, when did that kind of blossom alongside of this? And how much of like other noise artists, noise scene stuff were you tapping into and networking with at this time? Like labels, were you buying tapes? Were you trading with people? Were you because the mid 90s when Psywarfare, I think the first one that I'm aware of was 96.
I think the first release was 95, 96.
Okay, 95, 96. I mean, that's when there was like an incredible amount of brilliant noise happening in the US and Japan,
Mhm.
etc. Were you tapping into that? Were you networking with those
Yeah,
worlds at all?
I was corresponding with some people back then. Like what happened was, I think it was 93 when Koresh was having the Waco, Texas standoff. Is it 93? I don't remember. Whenever that was when I decided on the name because it was on CNN and it was always on. And then they were like, oh yeah, the psychological warfare tactical unit is coming in to like blast this sound at them. And it was like Tom Jones, What's New Pussycat, with like vivisection of rabbits screaming and I don't know, something else, maybe like power tools like Makita. So I saw that on TV, and then I looked up in the phone book or called the operator and asked for the ATF's phone number, and I called the ATF, and I was on the phone, I was on hold, and then I got through to someone, and I said, "Yeah, I'm watching this on television, and I think I could do a better job. I can make sounds that are more." Because I had this thing and a couple other things. I'm like, I can make sounds that are more, painful to people. And then I heard them like do something that sounded like they were started to record what I was saying. And they're like, could you hold on a second, sir? And I was like, sure. And then I'm like sitting there and I'm again overthinking. And I'm like, they're definitely recording this. Maybe I'm putting myself in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
So I hung up quickly. And who knows? Maybe they would have came back and given me a job. That
Right.
could have been a great job,
Were you sincere or were you teasing them?
No, I was sincere.
Yeah.
I was 100% sincere, but I have a side story to this. So I did, that was like, I don't know if that would be the dream job, but I was like, wow, that could be something I would be good at, And years later, decades later, when MySpace became a thing and America had the war in Afghanistan, I received a contact from a guy who was a sergeant in the PSYOPs department of the military, and he was stationed in Afghanistan. And he started to correspond with me through the DM, or I don't know if it was called DM then, but you know what I'm saying. So he would correspond with me and tell me like that his unit uses this stuff that I had recorded when I was younger as a sound weapon.
Psywarfare or Integrity?
Psywarfare stuff. So he said that, and some Integrity too. I think they use Vocal Test, which is a song where it's just like primal scream.
Yeah.
And what they did was they had like a sound cannon and they would aim it towards caves. And what would happen is these soldiers would have to to take a region, they'd have to go up this is what he told me, so I'm paraphrasing. They'd have to go up this hill and there would be like caves up there, and these guys would be like hiding in the caves waiting for the American soldiers to come up, and because they had the advantage, they take them out because they're hidden in the darkness. So this guy's team would have these sound cannons that would blast this kind of music into the cave, which would reverberate in there and drive these guys fucking crazy enough that they would run out and be like, this sucks, which I don't know if that was necessarily complimenting me. He didn't say sucks, but it would drive them crazy enough that they'd run out.
Yeah.
And then those guys would pop those dudes and kill them,
Wow.
So it was like a thing like that. So when they were telling me this, when this guy was telling me this, I was like, wow, it came true. And then I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to actually think about this, because I never really thought it would actually happen. So I was having mixed feelings about it.
So there you go.
Yeah, see, that's my flaw. That's why I never could make it. Yeah, that's my deficiency.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Wow. That's. Do you believe that? Do you believe
Yeah,
that?
he showed me documentation, so I could still actually correspond with the guy.
Wow.
He's still in the service. I think he might be stationed in Germany actually now.
Wow.
But it was, it's a weird thing to have that, have your music used that way,
Yeah, I mean, there have been also the reports of even torture situations like Skinny Puppy being used, or other types of bands or other types of heavy like metal, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, even like probably Rick Ashley or something too.
Yeah, I mean anything can really make you go crazy.
Like what they were doing with Tom Jones,
Right.
What's New Pussycat and stuff. So, I don't know if it necessarily means that I'm super extreme either. It just was that this guy's taste was that. And I think that if I remember right, he said something along the lines of like, that was what influenced him to take that direction in the military, was because he liked those records and he liked the concept that I had about them. And so he kind of made it a reality.
Wow. So tell me about then like the early Psywarfare days of the recordings, like when that became a break-off project. There was also a split with Integrity.
Yeah.
Which, I think was very, to my understanding, very influential for a lot of people. Roman again told me like this split, he was a huge Integrity fan and he had this split, and for many years it was just like, this is crazy, like some crazy shit on the other side. But eventually it was his, gateway to noise. I'm sure that worked that way for a lot of other people. I mean, when did you start Psywarfare as a project? I mean, I know when, but like, what was the intent there, and how did that coincide with what you were doing with Integrity?
Well, the intent would be, I guess, making sound as a weapon. I didn't really think, I don't know if I think that I fantasized that it would come true, but I didn't think that it really would come true, like in the story we just talked about. I just thought sound could be used as a weapon, and that could also be somehow enjoyable to listen to, at least for me, and that it would be more extreme, I guess, going back to my theory on White House, or maybe I read that they actually said that, I don't know, that they were taking punk and making something more dangerous than punk, because punk wasn't dangerous, that thing. So I don't know, maybe I thought that this was more extreme and more violent music to do. And then that was probably my goal in doing it. I mean, I know that was my goal in doing it, sound as a weapon. And fucking with people's heads too. I mean, like, I gave you that Yellow record, Circle Gets the Square.
Yeah.
So that record deliberately confused a lot of people who either liked the other records, because the one you were talking about, Psychotepic, that came before that.
Right.
And there was a lot of other ones that came before that. So people who got that record were probably like, wait a minute, was this guy trying to be like on the radio or something? Yeah. But then like other stuff comes in and it hits them and they're like, oh, what the fuck? And then either they thought it was just crazy or ADHD, like I couldn't focus. But really it was deliberately trying to make trouble with the label, not against the label.
Yeah.
But I accidentally was on a label that was known for break beat and drum and bass stuff, and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Because it was, the internet wasn't a thing really, so I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I done that record, that CD that you talked about from Zycotepic with Love, which is a reference to the Process Church and them killing people and burying them in Zycotepic. That's another story. But after that CD came out, a few months or so later, I received another package of CDs from different people that were dance oriented, but not really dance, but kind of broken dance,
Yeah,
Aphex Twin kind of
yeah.
that stuff. And then the note said these bands sampled and remixed your stuff. And I didn't really understand what that meant. And I went to the store that was a local store in Cleveland and asked the guy behind the counter what that meant. And then he explained to me what a remix was because I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, how are they going to remix it? Because they don't have the master tracks.
Yeah.
They just have like that. And he was like, they just add stuff to it. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was something that wasn't really a common term at the time.
Yeah.
So I had no idea. And then I realized that the label was known more for that than what I was doing. And so then I said, oh, maybe I can make a record to fuck with those people.
Yeah.
You know, not really in a malicious way, but
Yeah.
slightly malicious, probably.
What was was there any like strong feedback about that record?
No, because what happened was when that record came out, so the guy who owned the label was called Vinyl Communications, and the guy who owned the label had this band called Tit Wrench. And Tit Wrench used a lot of artwork that would collage Dolly Parton, who is known for her mammary glands. And they would like kind of parody her breasts because she was like an iconic person who had big breasts at the time. And then and the band's called Tit Wrench because the guy's also a plumber. So there's a good thing. So someone from Dolly's camp went into Amoeba Records one day in LA, and it was either in cap or it was on a shelf where you could just see it right away. She saw Dolly in a collage with war and fucking bombs and crazy stuff, picks it up and is like, what the fuck? Why would Dolly make this record? Started looking at it, realizing it wasn't Dolly's record, bought it, took it to Dolly. Dolly got pissed, took it to her lawyer. Her lawyer gets pissed, the management gets pissed. And then they sue Bob, the guy who owned the label, for fuckloads of crazy money that he's not making off of chaotic drum and bass and noise records and stuff. So he had to go like bankrupt with it. And my record had just come out. So all of my records got seized. And then years later, they started like people could, like those TV shows where people buy like a warehouse and it's filled with weird shit. And then they maybe have something cool, and then a lot of junk that they sell for $1 on eBay. My stuff was sold for $1 on eBay years later. My records were, and that's how it kind of got released
later. Yeah, because
post-mortem through eBay, 50 cents, $1. And it would also, the guy who bought it was probably just a guy in a bank or like a regular guy who was like, I don't know what this is. And so there wasn't even like other little taglines where you'd at least know where it was. It was just like called the name of the record and people.
That's kind of a cool way to release it though. I mean, that's like even more subversive somehow. Like it really just seeps out through like other ways. Cause I was looking at like the release date on it and like the Discogs. There was some sort of like weird time gap there. And I was trying to figure out what was.
Well, what you're talking about.
Maybe it was a reissue.
Yeah, because you did a review on your show, and I think that the vinyl didn't come out.
Okay.
It was at that time vinyl wasn't a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Vinyl had died, and nobody did vinyl really. A few bands would do vinyl, like my metal band would do vinyl, but like vinyl was not a big thing anymore. CD was the thing.
Yeah.
And it only came out on CD. But years later, the version I gave you on vinyl, that was put out by Sin Eater Records. My friend Delphin Lopez made that. And he did that, I don't know, 20 years after it had originally come out on vinyl.
Got it. So it was a reissue.
That's where it came out, like one format.
Yeah.
Was 20 years later.
Tell me about Cleveland and, what that city's like and what that city maybe meant for the sound of the band, and also working with, Steve Makita, Apartment 213, Lockweld. A bit about that, dynamic and relationship and the projects.
Well, Cleveland was like an industrial city, not like Throbbing Gristle industrial, but like industrial factories and
Yeah.
everything. And I guess that probably lent itself to people liking industrial music because there was a scene, Nine Inch Nails is from
Yeah.
there. And like Ministry would play there all the time and bands like that. But it was a dark city filled with like pollution and ugly gray. Everything felt impoverished too, and it felt hopeless. So maybe that lent itself somehow to it. And at a certain point, I lived in the city, and it was like really fucking desolate and abandoned in a way. And a lot of like abandoned buildings, like abandoned police buildings, even. And we would go break into those and explore and like do all this stuff. And that probably added a bit to the darkness of it all and the hopelessness of it all, probably too. As far as Makita is concerned, I met Makita sometime in the early 90s, and he had a band that was more of a hardcore band, I think. I can't remember what it's called. And then he switched into doing Apartment 213, which is Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment
Right.
number. So, and it was kind of like grind. They called it power violence. It's like
Right.
grind yelling stuff, kind of noise too. And so he was like, yeah, I'm doing this now. And I'd been friends with him, like just like friends as guys that go to shows and stuff. So he was like, and I don't know if he said, would you put it out on my label? If I would put it out on my label, or I don't know how it came to be. But eventually we agreed to do it. And then I did a 7-inch for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point he was like, yeah, this isn't enough for me. I feel that this is limiting. And then he wanted to go into like just using fucking circular saws and like cutting metal and like being really explosive like that with power tools. And then that's when he started Lockweld, but he didn't have any way to record. So he would come to my house and then I would record and I would add things to it. So I was kind of like a producer and maybe like, and I was in the band too a little bit, but I mostly wanted it to be his band.
Yeah.
And it was his band. I mean,
Yeah.
so.
And you guys have a recent, you've collaborated a few times, a number of times over the years, right? But you have a new release out together.
Yeah, he has a project called Makita, which is his name.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, we misspelled his name on purpose because there's power tools that are
Right.
called Makita with an A.
Right.
And so we would deliberately spell his name wrong to like make it seem like his name was the power
Yeah,
tools,
yeah.
like Skill Saw or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
right? But but his name actually is Makita. It's just a little bit different spelling. So when he and I were talking, and I said, "Oh, you should do it again." And originally, I thought he should go back and do Lockwald again because I think that would be fun. But he didn't want to go rehash any of that old stuff. So he thought, "Well, I want to do something different." And we were talking. We talk a lot. So somehow we came up with the dialogue of, well, what he's really into Christianity because 20 some years ago he got diagnosed with like some real terrible news and had to have like surgery and was like basically dying, and he's like in the hospital bed and he had like some other personal things going on that were devastating to him while he's fucking dying on top of all that. And so he was like, this fucking sucks, this is the end and I have to fucking get hit with all of this at the same time. What the fuck, And then he decided that he would like pray and do that, and it worked for him. And so he's invested in that, and that's his direction since then. And he got himself healthy and moved to California and became like a professional skateboard guy, and that's his life now. But he always wanted to get back into noise, but he felt like he would get back if he got back into noise that people might not they might resist him too much. Not like the resistance that I was talking about where we're like, fuck everybody resistance, but just that nobody would cooperate with him. And that maybe even like the most extreme people would be like, alienating him to a point where he couldn't get anything accomplished.
Because of the Christianity?
Yeah, because of that, because they'd say, oh, this is too wholesome or whatever. So then over some talking, you know, we just sort of came to the agreement, like, who gives a fuck what people think, you know? I'm not invested in his religious beliefs, but I'm his friend.
Yeah.
And I read the Bible and I like it, but I like it for a different reason.
Yeah.
And so he took that approach with his lyrics, and then I just create the sounds that I thought would make sense for it, you know? And that's how it came to be.
Cool.
But there were some people who disagreed with his approach and didn't want to work with him for it. But there was a lot of people who also were like receptive to it and thought it was actually even like controversial because it's so different than what people are expecting.
Yeah, I mean, it is very different, and I feel like even if you don't agree with it, I feel like there's so much stuff in power electronics and noise that we don't agree with that we still indulge in and find interesting. It's like if you can deal with something, you know, that if you can listen to something that deals with fascism or whatever, or something really grotesque that you don't agree with, like, shouldn't be like violently against Christianity. I mean, either you listen to it or you don't. But I think people like rejecting it wholesale or like keeping them out of the scene would be like pretty unusual or pretty.
And there's an underside to all of it too, whereas we're deliberately using specific frequencies that are designed to kill disease and to kill, you know, parasitic things in you. Whether that works or not, I don't know.
Sure.
But researching those frequencies and using them in the sound was part of the idea behind it all too. And then he's giving a positive message, even though it may not. If you don't speak English, it probably just comes across as he's yelling about serial killers or pornography like everybody else. Because, you know, unless you're really paying attention to what he's saying, it could sound like the other stuff.
Yeah.
But he's actually saying positive things to people. Christian things, but also not like, you know, positive things like that uplifting things. It's not something I would be singing about, but it's his voice. So it's not for me to get involved in that.
What were some of your earliest approaches to the noise itself in Psywarfare?
Equipment wise, you mean?
Equipment wise, but yeah, like just how you put pieces together, how you played them, what you were drawn to.
I'd like to do things that would be different every time. That was something that was really interesting to me, and I like things that were like not all, you know, predictable sounds. I did a lot of looping with like pedals that would loop, like delay pedals that would loop, and I had this Boss made these like mini rack things, and they were like, I guess it was supposed to be sort of like those Euro racks that people use nowadays, but they were like these little boxes, and there would be like delays and pitch shifters and stuff, and they were like these little weird boxes. And I had some equipment that I wasn't using, like traditional equipment, and I traded it in at this music store. And then they said, oh, we have all of these. Maybe that would be, because I was just saying, I need something that would do crazy stuff. And they were like, try these. And what I would do with that is I would like, I think it had double inputs. So I could like make the output go into the input again. So it would like feed back upon itself. And then you could turn the knobs and like that would like be self-generating craziness through the processed effects that were built into the system. So I used that a lot early on. And then we had vocals and things like that too. I had this Novation, the first base station, this Tenma thing. I also had a Nord lead at some point, but I don't have it anymore. And that could do some pretty crazy sounds. It could also do some pretty dumb sounds, you know.
It seems like that stuff it's really synth based at a time where getting into synths was maybe like not as common in noise. Like nowadays you have like the whole synth revival about like, you know, everyone's knows what they are and what they're worth, and the price has gone up, and now you have all these modular things you can buy. They make crazy synths just for noise. They make stuff specifically, so it's
Yeah.
But it sounds like the sound of that earlier stuff to me is like kind of different, and it sounds like you were just kind of using things that people weren't really using for that kind of music.
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
probably true. I mean, I deliberately try to use things that are not intended for that purpose usually, but also like maybe a form of like synesthesia where instead of making music, I'm thinking about making like painting or something. So it's like these are colors, these sounds are colors, and I'm painting something with those sounds. I mean, it sounds kind of pompous. I don't mean it to be that way, but I don't think of it the right way. Even with my other band, I never really thought of it the correct way.
Yeah.
And by not thinking of it the correct way, it gave me a unique sound by accident,
Sure.
because the approach is wrong, then results are wrong, but sometimes they're so wrong that it works for some people.
Yeah.
At least it works for me. So that's really that's my bar, is that I have to like it and I have to care.
You mentioned like in the beginning just people's reaction to Integrity being really kind of freaked out by the other influences of sound and thematics. How about when Psywarfare came on the scene? I mean, were those records getting put out and exposed to also like the hardcore crowd? And what was people's response to them? I mean, the split with Integrity, that's a pretty that's a pretty forced statement, I think, to be like, oh, you like Integrity, you got to listen to this.
Well, it wasn't so much you gotta listen. It was
Well,
more
but
like
you know
a
what I mean. But it's
fuck
like
you kind of thing. I
yeah,
think.
but you're really putting it like in their face with it. You know, like
Yeah.
you're really putting it together.
We're rubbing their nose in it,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. And what was the reaction to that? Like once Integrity was maybe established, I mean, beyond just the kind of general animosity towards Integrity, but like once that was established,
I didn't really hear any feedback until like Roman told me that he liked it a few years ago. I'd never heard anybody really have any opinion on it so much. I had heard people over the years say, "Oh, I got that," and um, that made me think I could do something like that too. A couple people, but I never really heard anyone say, "Oh, I like it," or anything like that. There was also a Lockweld Integrity split that around the same time too that I was on. But the idea was that we wanted to just do like crazy stuff that we liked, and if other people liked it, great. If they didn't like it, I don't care.
Sure.
So it wasn't really like my I wasn't investing in like public approval on it in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I probably hoped that people would be more mad than anything.
Sure.
And it had a disclaimer on the one, the Integrity Psywarfare, that said, be careful of playing it at faster RPMs because it could affect, like, it could cause seizures in your household pets and things like that. And the label actually had that added. I'd like to say that was my idea and that I was trying to market it and be like,
extreme.
Extreme. Like, look how fucking extreme. But the label did it because they were worried that it would cause lawsuits. So they put that on there.
Somewhat seriously.
They were serious in the sense that they didn't want to get into trouble because they were like, this sounds like fucking, they hated it, but they did it anyways.
Yeah.
And I think that they were worried that they might have somebody like have a seizure and then sue them.
So as things progressed, you were in Cleveland all this time, and now you live in Belgium. What brought you to Belgium?
I moved to Belgium in like 2003. I was on tour in Europe with Integrity, and a friend of mine who actually lives out in Kortrijk, he had bought a house, a big house, and he lived there alone. And he said, hey, and I'd known him for years traveling over here with.
He was a Belgian guy.
He is a Belgian guy, yeah. And I'd known him for years because he has a band and we were friends. And he was like, hey, I have this house that I bought. I live there alone. There's like 4 or 5 bedrooms in it. I only need one. If you want, after the tour, you're welcome to stay. So I thought, oh, wow, that's something I never thought about doing, which is kind of embarrassing, I guess, is that after a tour, I could have just like hung out and like explored and enjoyed different places and had
Mhm.
a good experience. So I said, fuck, I should take him up on this offer. So then I stayed for a while and then made some friends and I met my wife and then I came back. I did a tour in America and then I came back and stayed since then. So
Cool.
yeah,
And
there's other parts to it, but
yeah.
like when I lived in Cleveland, like people were very friendly to me
Yeah.
and I wasn't getting any work done because of that. And like all I was doing was like celebrating past accomplishments with music and things. And I wasn't working on anything new because every place I would go, people, oh, you can stay after hours. Oh, you can get in for free.
Mm.
Oh, do you want some free drinks? Oh, like everything was like, not that I was a celebrity, but I was treated too well.
Mhm.
And I was just, I was celebrating too much. And that was detrimental to what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to make things because that's the only time I'm really happy is when I'm making things. So there was an aspect of being able to escape that and live in a place where nobody really knew who I was.
The culture, I mean, the apocalyptic culture of like the US is really strong. More so maybe now than it was back then. And you could argue that it's here in Europe as well too, but it's different. Did that feel like therapeutic at all or healing or what was that like going from Cleveland to Belgium?
Well, I didn't live in Cleveland at the climate that America's in now. It wasn't like that. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe the closest thing that we had then would be like the 9/11 thing or
Mhm,
something.
mhm.
And people were probably like maybe too patriotic. Like you'd have punk people who the next day after, September 12th, they were like all gung ho for the government and had
Mhm.
like fucking patriotic flags on their fucking cars and shit. Sorry,
It's okay. It's okay.
had all this patriotic stuff, and
Yeah.
I thought that was a strange approach. But I didn't really care about it either. I just avoided that
Yeah.
stuff. I wasn't invested in that. I mean, like my religious persecution and darkness comes from my upbringing and it's just ingrained in who I am. So regardless of what is the climate of any political landscape at the time, whatever era isn't really relevant. I'm still haunted by my upbringing and my of my religious upbringing, and it's just infused into who I am. So the politics and things like that doesn't have any real effect on me. I mean, sometimes I'll look at things and be like, "Wow, that's fucking taking it too far. Or that's super crazy that people are falling for this shit,"
Yeah.
or whatever. But it doesn't really affect me
Yeah.
personally.
Do you feel that you've kind of freed yourself from some of that? Or do you still feel as angry and like
I'm probably not as angry as I was as a
yeah.
teenager, but I still have this. I mean, there's also this aspect of like I would like to know, like I said earlier, like I have this affliction where I'm trying to solve problems that affect me. And that's one of the biggest ones is why do these fucking parasitic creatures, the human race, exist and how we exist? And every question like that a lot of people ponder. And it really drives me fucking crazy. And I think about it way too much. And probably the answer is something more in a relaxed state of mind rather than a forced uh, attempt to find a conclusion or
Mhm.
resolution to it. But yeah, I'm stuck in that. I've always been stuck in that. And I'm kind of comfortable in it, I guess. I mean, that's where I've existed always almost, even since I was a little kid. But I don't know. I don't think it's gotten better.
Do you feel like music is something you actively use to deal with that?
I definitely use it as a valve to let the pressure out.
Still now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I made this huge mistake several years ago to stop drinking. And so like I don't drink, and like everything is so fucking clear now in the world, you know? I don't mean the answers. I mean just the vividness of the
Yeah.
world's deficiencies
Yeah.
are so fucking crystal clear and painstakingly so.
Yeah.
And it drives me absolutely crazy half the time, you
Yeah.
know, like dealing with other people in some capacities, and like my expectations of other people, or my investment in other people. And I think like, oh, this person's gonna like take this opportunity and really like run with it and excel. And then they just trip over their own feet and just fall flat on their face and drag me down with them and like all this stuff. And it drives me absolutely crazy, you know?
Mhm.
And it's not just one person, it's like a lot of people, but maybe it's, you know, mental illness, and that I think that I'm seeing it clear, but I'm probably not. Who knows? But that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Does it feel like a mistake to quit drinking?
It doesn't feel like a mistake to quit drinking. I didn't quit, and I also didn't quit drinking for any cool reason, like that I crashed a fucking Ferrari filled with strippers or anything
Yeah.
like that, or any cool thing like that. It was just simply like my body wasn't able to like maintain hangovers anymore.
Yeah.
And because of my job, I travel a lot, and I was like just disgusted with like getting up with a hangover, going to the airport, having to go into airport toilets with a sick stomach, get on a plane with a sick stomach in these tiny fucking nasty
Yeah.
airplane toilets. And I just, at one point, I was in Vegas, and maybe it is a cool story after all, because there's Vegas involved. But so I was leaving. I played this festival called Psycho Las Vegas, and I get into the airport and I have to, you know, use the facilities there. It's totally fucking filthy in the airport. And then I get on the plane. I'm still not feeling well, so I'm like on the toilet in the fucking plane, and I'm like sitting there like, this fucking sucks. I hate this. And I sort of asked myself, like, you know, I wish that I didn't have to fucking endure this shit. This
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
And then this other voice in my head, this like instead of having like the angel and the devil, I have like two devils or
Yeah.
more. And then one of them was like, yeah, fucking stop drinking, you stupid fuck.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not so cool or exciting
Yeah.
really, but it was just like a health thing, really, I
Yeah.
guess. But not like that I'm trying to be super healthy either. It was just like I just didn't want to endure the misery of that anymore. But with that came the price of being completely
Sober.
sober, aware, everything is in focus. And that drives me crazy too. Because like there's a thing, I'm sorry, I'm really going off away
Good.
from the
No,
noise
it's
thing.
good. It's good.
But there's like a thing that really drives me crazy is when people fucking don't know why they do things. Like I'm a person who knows why I do almost everything that I do. Even when I'm badly behaved, you could say, "Oh, why did you do that? Why did you overreact? Why did you, you know, make a fool of yourself?" I'll have an answer, and it might not be it's an honest answer. It
Yeah.
might not be a good answer.
Right. Right.
It
Right.
might not be like, "Oh, that makes sense."
Yeah.
But I do know why I did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many people that I deal with, their answer is that they don't know. And then that drives me fucking crazy because I can't imagine that people are on autopilot like that. But so many people are on autopilot.
Yeah.
So it's a real fucking thorn in my side hearing that people don't know why they do the things that they do. And like I'm always trying to like make things. So a lot of the people that I work with are also supposed to be fucking making things. And when they're not making things, I'm like, well, why are you not doing it? What the fuck?
Yeah.
I can't fathom that.
Yeah.
And I can't fathom why people would be in an opportunity to be able to make records and do these things, but then not do it. You know, like that's mind boggling to me. I mean, I have projects where I'm like really fucking late on it, but I'm not late on it because I'm not passionate about it or because I don't like it. It's because I'm trying to find the right muse, the right voice, the right inspiration to make it work. And sometimes it can be harder and sometimes it's fucking super easy. It just depends. But I also, there again, I have an answer. I have a reason why. It's not, I don't know. Like,
Right.
I don't know. I'm just fucking watching Netflix or what, you know. And even that's an answer. These people don't even give me that. They just
Right.
don't fucking know. It drives me super crazy.
I mean, it could, yeah, I mean, it could be like what you said though. Like a lot of it's like people that maybe do know, but they're ashamed to admit it.
That could be. But I've gotten into like heated disputes with people and asked them, like, I'm like, just tell me why. I mean, like, even if you're ashamed, I won't judge you on it, but I'd like to know that you have a reason why you're not doing it, even if it's an embarrassing reason. Because what's more embarrassing is that you don't know. And what are you, like, possessed? What
Right.
is there a ghost involved? Like, what the fuck? You know,
Yeah.
there is no rational, and I'm being facetious with that,
Sure,
but
sure.
you know, they have to have a fucking reason as to why they're doing their things that they're doing.
Are these like music situations?
Generally music situations or creative situations.
Yeah.
But it could be other things, but generally it's that,
Yeah.
you know. So I don't understand it, you know.
Yeah.
Because some people, I mean, to a lot of people, doing music for a living, being able to make records, that's a fucking dream. And it is for me.
Sure.
And so to me, I'm like, why would you like not be passionate about that? I don't understand that,
Yeah.
you know. So,
Hardworking.
yeah, I guess like I have like a work ethic to
Yeah.
it, even though it's not really work. It doesn't
Right.
feel like work to me.
Right.
But I also can't stop thinking about it all, even in my sleep, in my dreams, everything. It's a constant thing. It keeps me up at night in a good way.
Yeah.
Probably not a mentally healthy way, but it
no, I think
keeps
to
me
me
up
that
in a
sounds
way.
like you know, despite maybe having anger outwardly, but that's like the magic ticket is like finding something like that in life that you love doing, that you can do, that makes you feel good, and
Yeah.
letting that be your work. I
And
mean,
again, I mean, I grew up in Indiana, in LaFountain, Indiana. If you look that up on Google Maps, there's fucking cornfields and pig farms, and there's nothing around for fucking miles and miles and miles and miles. I sure as fuck shouldn't be doing an interview with you about crazy fucking electronic music from Belgium. Like, and that's my job. Like, that just doesn't, that is so fucking unlikely that
jackpot.
I have to be like very grateful that
Yeah.
the fucking universe threw me in this direction,
Yeah.
because what are the fucking odds? I mean, I'm sure that every kid that I went to school with back then, they're all farmers.
Right.
I'm 100% sure that every one of them is a farmer,
Yeah.
and some are dead
Right.
probably. And that's it. None of them got out, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't keep up with these people, but I'm certain that that's probably the case. And I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Like, because usually I would imagine that somebody who grew up in a very like urban environment would be more likely to be doing this kind of a job, you know, but somehow it worked out this weird way.
I think it's more common on I mean, okay, numbers is maybe not common, but I feel like a lot of the greatest artists, greatest bands, and everything come from like fuck all
Hmm.
wherever, and like they moved to New York to
connect or
to
something.
connect and make it, but they're not from there, and I feel like
Yeah, that could be.
that's pretty common.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely alienating to be me in those environments as a kid. And because of that, that's probably why I got into like doing the weird things with tapes and gluing records. And like, we even had like um, big electrical poles outside from the street. And then they would come into the house. And there was like a grounding wire off of the garage that would like, was really taut and pulled to the ground. And I used to take like boards and like hit it and like slide it like a slide guitar. And that would resonate through the garage. The garage would be like the body of a guitar. If I'd open the door, then I would like have this giant fucking guitar, and I would like play that as a little kid
That's
with like baseball bats or like the
yeah.
2x4s. But again, I didn't think that was musical. I just thought that was something to like drive people crazy,
Yeah.
entertain me.
Yeah.
People were like, "What the fuck are you doing? And how is that working?" I also didn't really know how it was working. I was just doing it, and it was like bad results. So I was like, I like that, you know.
Sick.
It was a weird time, you know.
Here you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to have been made all the fucking wrong steps to end up in the right place, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. but I'm glad that I did.
You've done a few labels,
Yeah.
right? Over the years.
I've done 2 labels.
2 labels, okay.
Dark Empire Records was my first one, and that predominantly dealt with Cleveland area bands at the time when I was running it, but my friend runs it now,
Yeah.
Alex. And then after that, I started a label called Holy Terror,
Mhm.
and that was what put out the first Lockweld and the first Psywarfare, and several other things. I also put out Controlled Death Records
Mhm.
and Charles Manson Records. I
Right.
put out for Manson. Um,
Tell me about that. The Charles
Yeah,
Manson record.
that was an interesting thing. So I think it was also MySpace time. I got a message from this guy who was like Manson's like right-hand man. His name is Grey Wolf. And he was like, hey, I read on the internet that you like Charlie's stuff, music and things. And we were wondering if we could talk to you because we need some help with like musical stuff. And I was like, okay, yeah, like I can call you or whatever. So I called him and we spoke on the phone and he was like, yeah, like Charlie has this music and he wants to have it recorded and we want to make records. Like he had done some records in the past. Some were against without his knowledge,
Mhm.
without his consent, and others were with his consent, and the first one being the Lie album, that
Mhm.
the girls were selling that in front of the courthouse to like raise money to pay for the lawyers and
Right,
things.
right.
And with this, they wanted to kind of go back to that idea and make records. And they asked me how it worked, so I explained to them how I'm not going to bore everyone with how fucking
Sure.
records work, but how it works. But the end of the conversation was, and then you give them a deposit, and then they start the process. And they didn't have the deposit, so they were like,
You
"Well,
mean
we
like
don't-
the plant?
the plant. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
give them money,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
they're not going to do it
Right,
for
right,
you."
right, right.
So they were like, "Well, we don't really have any money." I'm like, "Well, then you're going to have a hard time doing it."
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, could you help us do it?"
Yeah.
And then I was like, "I don't know, like it's like a lot to take on."
Yeah.
Not just I mean, I like the music, but it's a lot to take on, like dealing with the Manson family
Right.
in a business capacity isn't like,
Yeah.
it's something you have to be a little bit wary of um, initially. So, and I had some friends who had dealt with them in the past, and it didn't go as the Manson family had thought it would go, and so therefore they got mad and
Uh-huh.
like there was bad blood. So I kind of didn't want to have like bad blood with the Manson family,
Understand.
as most people might
Yeah.
also also
Reasonable, yeah.
pontificate. So eventually I said, yeah, I can try to help you out with that. And so like, there was money that was given to a guard who brought a iPhone into the jail cell. So that with with your iPhone, you can record music in like GarageBand. You can do a
Mhm,
lot
mhm.
of interest, even with the voice memo thing. Well, these guys didn't understand that. So what he would do is he would call Grey Wolf, and Grey Wolf had a answering machine from the 70s with a cassette deck in it. And then after, it would be like, you reached Grey Wolf. I'm not here right now. Please leave your message at the tone. Beep. Then he would start playing into the iPhone, into the fucking tape. And then they'd have to translate the tape to digital.
So he was calling him.
Yeah. Instead of using it like through sending it, like how we might do it.
So
But
recording to the phone.
but these are old guys,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you can't
yeah.
expect them to know that stuff. So yeah, so that was like
That's
an
funny.
amusing aspect to
So
it.
were you financing that operation?
I can't say that I
But-
was involved in that because that's illegal.
Okay.
But maybe I was part of that,
Okay.
So the recordings got made, and then I said, well, I'll put out a 7-inch. And then I think that the idea was that I put out a 7-inch, and then whatever that generated, I could give them that money, then they could start their label. Cause like a lot of times, like with the Makita thing and with other things, I like to be like, I like to help people get started, and then they leave the nest, and then I
Yeah.
can just do my own shit because
Yeah.
I'm busy.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw it like that. Like, I'll help you guys get this part started.
Yeah.
You'll make a bit of money, use that money as your deposit, and then you can turn it into your record label.
Mhm.
And they were going to go that direction with that. That was what the idea originally was. But they also it was poor timing because a couple aspects. If we did it in the 90s, then it would have been a hot item. In the 80s, a hotter item. But by the time that this came about, which was maybe like, I don't know, 13 years ago or something. I don't remember exactly when it was. Manson was no longer the boogeyman. Nobody really gave a fuck or even knew who he was. Most people thought Manson was Marilyn Manson and that no one cared about Charlie Manson. Charlie Manson was no longer dangerous to people. He wasn't hiding under the bed. He wasn't scaring children anymore, like my upbringing. And it just wasn't, it didn't have the impact. And then in addition to that, most distributors that I dealt with wouldn't carry it because of the controversial aspect of what Vincent Bugliosi made up. Most of that's fictitious about him and his whole the Helter Skelter book. Most of that's fictitious shit that the prosecutor made up because he was offered a book deal. If he could get a conviction, then he could get this book deal and possibly a movie deal, which he did get, and live a glamorous, rich life in Beverly Hills poolside. Which, as a side thing, if you want to hear a funny story, I was interviewed in a magazine in the 90s, and the name is I'm drawing a blank on the name. But the cover was ICP were on the cover. And in the magazine was like Motley Crue and me and a few other people, but also Vincent Bugliosi. And in the interview, they asked me about this Manson stuff. And I talked about it. And I said, yeah, like the Helter Skelter thing's not really true. Some of it is true. Most of it's fictitious, just to sell books, his books, and to get him the deal that he was offered. And he abused his position as the prosecutor for Los Angeles for financial gain, and that should be a crime within itself. Not saying that Manson is a good guy, not saying that Manson is innocent, but what he did was also, criminal and corrupt. And now he's living, I said this in the article, now he's living in Beverly Hills, poolside, sipping champagne. You turn the page, and there's a picture of Bugliosi in Beverly Hills, poolside, sipping champagne. And then it starts an interview with him. LeVay was in it too, this issue. I don't remember the fucking name of the mag.
We'll find it.
It's George Petros, I think, was part of the magazine. And he used to have Exit magazine before that. And it was, I want to say it was called Sounds, but maybe not that. I can't remember. It was more of a mainstream rock magazine. But yeah, it was a funny side thing. I'm sorry, I'm meandering.
That's
with
cool.
stories.
No, that's great.
But so anyways, I made the 7-inch for Manson decades later.
Yeah.
And I told myself, this is going to be a good story. This is something, you can, when you're on your deathbed, you can look back and be like, oh, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that. And it was one of those things. And so I agreed to do it. I did the 7-inch. The distributors wouldn't touch it because of the controversial aspect, because they're older people, generally, these distributors I dealt with, who remembered the past.
Yeah.
And then the younger people, they don't have any fucking clue about it. And then the people who would have bought it in the 90s are now buying fucking, soccer balls for their kids and paying for their kids' tuition into college. They're not going to be buying fucking Charles Manson 7-inches. So it really wasn't selling very well at all. And on top of it, it wasn't really controversial songs where he was singing about killing people. It was just singing about blues music, My Baby Left Me kind of stuff,
Yeah.
So it didn't do very well. And then the Manson family started to get upset
Uh-huh.
because they said, well, when the Beach Boys took one of his songs and, and they did that B-side with it, it sold millions. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, in 1969,
Yeah.
it sold millions and
Yeah.
they were the Beach
Yeah.
Boys. This is not 1969.
Yeah.
The Beach Boys are not involved.
Yeah.
And this format is kind of dead
Yeah.
too. I mean, it has a bit of an audience, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's how many people are desperately looking for that.
Right.
At that time, it wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
So I said, well, rather than have bad feelings between us, let me do this. I'll give you all the copies I have.
Yeah.
I don't want anything for it. I'll just give it to you. And then you guys can do whatever you want. And they said, well, we don't know what to do. And I said, I have a friend who's in California, not too far from you guys. If you want, you can work with him. If he wants to work with you, you guys work it out. I don't want to be involved. I want to have good feelings with you guys. I don't want to have any bad blood.
Yeah.
I don't want to have anybody saying that I'm, a pimp or any kind of negative stuff like has been said of friends of mine. So I sent them all their copies and I wish them the best. And we left on a good note, and I didn't really lose anything.
Yeah.
So I just got a good story out of it.
Yeah.
And then my friend put out a few more records for them.
Yeah. Okay. So
And,
it did develop into
Yeah, because there was a wealth of songs that were recorded.
on the iPhone to
To the cassette tape and then to the vinyl.
Yeah.
So we're really crossing a lot of technological eras there.
Did you deal at all with Charlie? during the time?
No. I did receive, I could show you downstairs, some like notes and postcards and like artwork that he gave to me for doing it and,
Yeah.
and photographs and things like that.
Oh.
And that was cool, But I didn't have the opportunity to go to the prison in California and then like go through all the fucking song and dance to get in and everything. I just didn't have the time, and I kind of didn't really want to do it because I should have probably done it, but I didn't want like the disappointment of it all. Probably,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I had a similar thing like that. Like one of my really good friends who passed away a few years ago was named Stephen Kasner. The painting downstairs that you were admiring that looks baconish, he did that painting.
Mhm.
He did a lot of paintings for bands and things like that. And at some point, he was managed by the same guy who managed H.R. Giger.
Mhm.
And when I had just moved over here to Belgium, he was invited to stay at Giger's house for a week and like hang out and like have a good time. And he knew I am a big fan of Giger. So he invited me to come too. But I was broke. I wasn't dead broke, but I didn't have enough money to fucking buy flights and go hang around for a week in
Right.
Switzerland. So I made up an excuse like, oh, I've got some stuff going on. I can't do it. But really, it was just I didn't have the money. So he went there. He had a good time. He had fun and stuff. And I always regretted not doing it. But, sometimes you got to pinch your pennies when you can,
Yeah.
So I didn't do it at that time. So maybe it's like that with the Manson thing,
Yeah.
or maybe I dodged a bullet because maybe, could have went bad. Maybe, these guys are unreliable with their
Yeah.
perceptions of reality
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. I think that's what I was thinking is like,
Yeah.
there's a reason. I mean, there's a reason that stuff hasn't taken traction beyond just that it's not that it, it's like there's a reason that it happens in such weird corners of the underground.
Yeah.
And it never really goes somewhere because I think that's probably difficult people to deal with. I feel.
Yeah, it's hard to talk to an older person about like sales, about records
Right.
nowadays or something, because like the perception is totally different,
Yeah.
I mean, even like I've talked to some people about things with what I do with music, and they can't understand. Like they think like, oh, I saw that you're on Spotify and you have millions and millions of plays. You must be like driving a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, they don't even give me enough for a loaf of bread
Yeah.
off that.
Yeah.
You don't get shit.
Yeah.
And people can't wrap their head around that
It's
sometimes.
true.
So,
Yeah, that's true.
there's things like that.
Yeah.
But like my friend Stephen Kasner, who we were talking about, he was one of the first guys to put together serial killer art shows or killer art shows, not necessarily all serial, but he became friends with Gacy and Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas and all these guys. And he would correspond with them and they would send him art and he would put on like exhibitions and show their art and sell their art and send them money for it. This was before it was some states made it illegal for them to be compensated for things like books or artwork. And he had some fun stories about that, like meeting Gacy and Gacy trying to get him to go into a closet with him, and he was like, "No thanks."
That's insane.
I like to kind of spring a surprise question on my guests at the end, and I like to ask them what their top 5 noise records or releases of all time are. And I like to kind of usually people at this point, a lot of people at this point are ready because they've seen them, they know it's coming. But I originally like the idea was just to like have it be off the top of their heads, like what are the 5 records that you think?
I've watched your podcast before, so I know that you have asked that question, but I didn't prepare for it.
Good.
So maybe I'm giving you what you want,
yeah.
but mostly not because I'm doing it ideally, just because I fucking am a scatterbrain about it, and I should have prepared.
No, it's good.
Oh, fuck. So I would say one of my favorites is Boyd Rice and Friends, Music, Martinis, and Misanthropy. I don't know if it's noise, but it's something, you know?
Yeah.
And it's definitely unusual and experimental. And when I worked on the God and Beast record, I think that Total War was on that record maybe, or it was part of the live performance that they did in Japan. I don't remember. But that was the inspiration to like redo Total War for that God and Beast record, which we recorded on that little Tascam over there.
Cool.
And so that would be one. I would say, can it also be singles or?
Any sort of release.
So like, I really like those Sordid Sentimental Throbbing Gristles 7 inches that came in the camo bag. And I guess, I don't know. I don't remember which way they worked. So I guess I'll just go with like Hamburger Lady, maybe. I don't know what the B-side, if it was United or what it was. But I had 2 of them. So it could be, there's a combination of different ones it could have been. I don't remember. And I'm not prepared, so.
That's good.
I get to use that as my excuse.
Yeah.
I have to say White House, but I don't know which one I would say is my favorite because they have such a vast diversity too.
Yeah.
And shit, I don't know. I guess I would say I like Birdseed a lot.
Yeah.
I like when they were very digital like that. But I also like when they were Wasp oriented too. So I'm not dismissing any of the other ones. There is no real, I can't really say that there is one favorite, but like lately that's one I would listen to more because of the clarity of it. And the recording situation made them able to just like really deliver on all cylinders.
Yeah.
That's 3.
Yep.
I really loved Pulse Demon and Venerology when those both came out. And I don't remember which one it was that that Merzbow toured on, but I got to open up for Merzbow on that tour, maybe Pulse Demon. And so Psywarfare played with Masana and Merzbow on that US tour that they did. And that was a lot of fun. And it was great to hang out with those guys. And I took them out for pizza and I took them out to shoot guns because they'd never shot guns before. Because I said, like, what do you guys want to do? Like, I didn't really have an idea of what they would say. And they were like, oh, can we shoot guns? And I was like, yeah, you could shoot guns. You want to shoot guns? They were like, yes. So I took them all shooting guns and they loved that. It was, you could just go to the range, you know, and shoot off pistols. And they were like so excited, like children, you know. And they're both older than me, so that was funny to see them be so excited about that. I have pictures of it on somewhere.
What are those guys like?
Super nice, quiet though.
Yeah.
But Japanese people tend to be more quiet, you know. I don't know if they're reserved or if they're just like observing you.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's it's a predatorial thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
But they're, you know, obviously very fucking creative people too, you know. And geez, so now I'm left with one more, huh? I don't know. A lot of pressure. Gosh. And this will probably be something I'll regret, like not getting the right one.
That's okay.
I guess I would say, you know, I'll go with this. I don't know what the title of the record was, but I got that Taint LP that was in like kind of like fencing barbed wire.
Yeah.
And Keith sent it to me, and I like the record for how it sounds, but what I liked more was that the idea that if I wasn't careful with the record, I would like wreck the record,
Yeah.
and then it would probably sound cooler.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, like
Yeah.
the idea of it becoming like ruined by pulling it out of the
Yeah.
sleeve. So for your listeners who may not know about this,
Yeah.
that it came in like not barbed wire, but this kind of like sharp fencing material. And like the tips of it were really fucking sharp on purpose to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Like I think that Keith said they wanted them to be ruined, you
Yeah.
know? Like how sometimes people will put like sandpaper and shit in there. You know?
Yeah.
It was like that idea.
Yeah. Cool.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And maybe that. I don't know.
That's a good one.
There's a lot of different ones.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be cool. I don't know. I'm just an old person. So some of those are like ones from like when I had stuff. And you know, like when you get stuff at certain ages, there's a nostalgia to that period of your life.
Yeah, of course.
And that was a period for me, even
Yeah.
though Birdseed doesn't match into that time frame.
Sure. What about? I mean, yeah. I mean, we talked about Psywarfare, but we really didn't talk about like that, like your involvement, like in like the American noise scene in those in like the '90s in those years. Like, what were you touring a lot with the project?
Not really touring, but I would play some shows.
Yeah.
I did, like I said, I did the Merzbow and Masana thing, and I played this festival called Expo of the Extreme. Have you ever heard of that? It's from Chicago, and it had like Boyd Rice, and it had Roz Williams. I think it was Roz's final performance before he died, and a whole bunch of other bands too, like Mortis. You know who he is? He does like kind of like goblin music or something.
Yeah, I know who he is.
I don't know what the term is. I'm not trying to be a dick. But there's a name for it, but I think it's called dungeon metal dungeon synth. Yeah.
But he dresses like a goblin.
Yeah. And ironically, I played with him again, like for the first time since 96 or whenever that festival was, like a few weeks ago in Bogota, Colombia.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't seen him since then.
Crazy.
So that was fun to see him.
As Psywarfare did you play, or with Integrity?
No, I played with Integrity there.
Cool. Nice.
And he still wears like a mask and stuff. And so I played that, and I'd play with like bands that would come through town. In Cleveland, we played with. Usually, it would be me and friends playing back then. Like Makita would be involved. My ex-wife Lisa would be involved. Sometimes Steve Kasner would also be involved, and a friend named Gary Pfluger. He owned a record store, and sometimes not them, sometimes different. Less of them and different combinations. I think we played with I know we played with Carolina Rainbow. We played with Tribes of Neurot, which was Neurosis's like percussive noise kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not really noise, but something. Tribal, experimental tribal maybe.
Familiar with it,
I think we might have played with White House. We played with Non. I don't know. Like it was a long time ago, and I didn't really pay attention to it. You know, I was just like doing it, and it wasn't so much of an event as it was just like something we would do.
Yeah.
So I didn't really put a lot of personal I don't know, accomplishment into the fact that I played the shows. I was just doing it because that's what we did.
Yeah.
And I didn't really. The only reason I know half of them is because in the hallway there are some VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And then it says Psywarfare with those bands. And that's the only reason I know. I don't really even fucking remember playing the shows except for that I have the VHS tapes. And so therefore it's true.
Yeah.
But if if I didn't have the VHS tapes, I would not know. There's probably other bands that I play with that I don't have the VHS tape. I have no fucking idea, you know?
Probably even more like
Yeah, maybe Makita's better
legendary
at
stuff.
remembering it than me.
Cool.
But I'm not good with nostalgia, and I'm not good with this. I'm lucky that I was even able to like answer some of the questions that you asked me because
yeah, you went way back. You went deep. You went deep. That's cool.
I'm surprised that I can do that. But
and you're going forward with, I mean, you're still rocking Psywarfare. You're still playing shows and still recording.
Yeah, I have some things coming out still, like new things. On Nil by Mouth from Italy, I have a tape. It's a split with Exome, also he's from Italy too.
Cool.
And I have a record that I'm working on for Relapse. 2 records I'm working on for Relapse. One is using an EMS Synthy 100 synthesizer. Do you know what that is? It's like the big wall of a fucking one, you know, and they're like hundreds of thousands of fucking euros. But like, I'm friends with these dudes in Ghent who are really popular in like synth pop world. And like one of my best friends is Igor Cavalera, and he's their drummer.
Oh, cool.
And so they got to use this synth for a year because the university in town needed a place to store it. And they're like, you know, like local heroes of music and stuff. They were able to get me in contact with the guy. And so like they did some recording, but they did some like nice recording, but I want to do like not so nice sounds with like something that costs more than a fucking house.
Yeah.
But I have like an appointment with the guy, and you know, he's going to talk how it works, where I have to like, you know, navigate certain knobs and things and plug in things. And then I can record it for the day.
Cool.
So,
Fun.
and lucky for me, like I don't have to have like danceable rhythms.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky in that regard. I just have to make things sound bad.
Yeah.
And I have this knack for being able to do that.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about that EDP Wasp, like I don't think I could make it sound nice like Flock of Seagulls or Depeche Mode if you put a gun to my head.
Yeah.
But I can make it sound fucking mean as shit.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. I'm just that's my touch. That's the magnetism of my body.
That's the
ruining it.
the corners that the blood pools down into.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So hopefully that'll turn out nasty. And I, you know, like the gimmick of it is that it's way too expensive for me to be allowed to touch that fucking thing, let alone make a record like this. And how dare I make such a blasphemous record using such a beautiful machine as that? So like that's what inspires me.
Yeah. It's like, back to your roots.
Yeah, there's trouble in there somehow.
Cool.
And then I'm doing another record that's just more like, I would have been fucking done with my record long ago, but all my friends keep fucking asking me to do stuff with them. Or like, I was even fucking doing stuff during the COVID era, and then everybody needed like songs for their you know, like funding thing, like, oh, we're putting a comp together,
right,
and you know, the money's going to help keep this venue alive or this thing alive or that alive. Will you give something like, okay, and then I give them a couple songs, and then I'd be like, fuck, now I'm down a song. I give another song, and now I'm down another fucking song, and then I'm in deficit of songs. I have to fucking keep going, and I keep like giving them away like a dumbass. And so then, you know, but I'm being funny. Sorry. It's just my time. You know, I don't have a lot of time sometimes. Because I have a lot of children and things to do. Traveling. And,
of course. Busy man.
Yeah. But I like it. But, you know, but I can also complain, I guess.
Well, I thank you for sitting down and sharing this with me and inviting me to your home.
My pleasure.
Showing me your synths and all that. Cool to meet you. Cool to hang out. And
same here, Oscar.
People, you know, they know where to find you. They should check you out at Flaw Fest coming up. That's going to be an amazing festival. Chance to see you play along with a lot of other greats.
Yeah, I'm excited to see all those guys. It's
cool. That's kind of coming together in that way, you know. Back to the roots. I think for Roman, it's a big thing. I think it's kind of like his dream show.
Yeah.
Guy from Cleveland, so he's kind of booking all the acts he wants, and I think like having Psywarfare on the bill is kind of like, you know, he described it as kind of like a full circle moment. So
that's nice of him.
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
Yeah,
we recorded some stuff together that I don't know whatever happened to it. We lost it or something.
Yeah,
It was me, him, and John Weiss,
Oh, cool.
and in Roman's basement.
Oh, cool.
We were just making up stuff.
Nice.
I think we recorded like 2 hours worth of madness.
Maybe it'll see the light of day then.
Yeah, we'll see.
Cool.
Sometimes, things slip through the cracks and you forget about them, and everybody's busy.
Yeah.
So we'll see. There's always more to record,
Anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
No, but thanks for the interview. It's great to meet you in person. And later on, I'll show you my city, and
Cool.
you can have some fun.
We're gonna get some
have
ribs?
some dinner. Yeah. Oh, you can eat ribs. The
That's
people who
perfect,
know
man. That's
who know
perfect,
my
man.
house know what we're talking about.
That's perfect, man.